Hey everybody, welcome to İsrailPod. I'm your host Fatih Şemsettin Işık, and I have my Jerusalem-based partner Mustafa Fatih Yavuz with me. So welcome Fatih, how are things there in Jerusalem?
Yeah, things are good. Coronavirus as always all around the world. We are trying to survive. But so far so good. Israel is going good in terms of inoculation, and we are hopeful that it will turn into a good atmosphere in the near future.
Okay, good to hear that. So, dear audience, as you can see, today this program will be the first episode of İsrailPod in English. In this first episode, we will talk about the Arab citizens of Israel and their constituency in the Israeli political scene, as the general elections are also upcoming. So, for a better discussion and having an insight from an expert point of view on this topic, we have a distinguished guest today. Dr. Arik Rudnitzky is an analyst from Israel Democracy Institute and the researcher in the Moshe Dayan Center at Tel Aviv University. Dr. Rudnitzky, welcome to our show.
Thank you so much, Fatih. Good evening to you.
Thank you so much. So, let me start with this question first. It seems that there is a growing popularity of the Arab voters among the Jewish political parties as the elections are also approaching. And in this political campaign, predictably, Benjamin Netanyahu is trying to steal the spotlights, contrary to his statements in 2015, like the Arabs are going to vote in droves. So do you think that he will succeed in his endeavor, or is there any way to, grab the attention of the Arab voters for Likud party?
In terms of political power, out of 120 members in the Knesset, if the Arab voters will vote with high percentage, the higher turnout on election day, they may have a potential of 20 seats. So the political potential in the Arab sector is huge, and I believe that the Jewish parties realize this factor very well this time. Of course, it has to do with the crisis in the Arab political landscape itself, and more specifically in the joint list in the Arab sector. But based on current public opinion polls, they predict the polls that the Likud party will gain between 2 or even 3 mandates from the Arab voters, which is really a huge number of votes, equivalent to some 60 or 70,000 votes that will the Likud granted this time. I think that this is a bit exacerbating the popularity of the Likud in the Arab street. But no one today can ignore the new political atmosphere in the Arab sector when Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu addressed directly the Arab sector just 2 weeks ago in what came to be known as the Nazareth statement, when he was hosted by Ali Salam, mayor of Nazareth, which is the largest Arab city in Israel.
Arik, I have a question. We talked to you before, and you told me that is because Likud can be at this time an alternative, because blue and white and also Meretz is no more politically relevant. And you told me that that's why Likud could be alternative Jewish party for Arabs who are citizens of Israel. We know that most of those Arabs voting for joint list, around 90% of the votes go to joint list. But this time, the predictions say they can get around 10 seats. Last time it was a record 15 number. How do you see the fate of Arab joint list in the near future and in the long term?
Much depends on the forthcoming elections. According to the polls, indeed, the joint list might lose almost 1/3 of its current political power, which is, by the way, a great loss from 15 to only 10. This is not so optimistic a prediction for the upcoming elections, but we have to bear in mind that the actual political campaign in the Arab street begins even in the closing 2 hours of election day. So if the starting point is 10 seats, according to the worst estimates, so I think that they might gain even 12 seats, which is not so bad based on the current political status and crisis in the joint list. But this is, of course, is depending on the question whether the joint list will eventually run and compete as a one joint list, which is not not should be taken for granted right now. Currently, there is a crisis in the joint list. Crisis is felt by the way that they did not address directly the public, saying that or confirming that, well, this time, despite all the crises and disputes in the joint list, we do intend to run together on the elections. Such a statement did not take place. Hence, the public feels that there is a mistrust between the list's component, and this has negative implications on the public. So, if eventually they run together, they might regain and preserve some of their achievement in the last election. But should they break apart into two lists in order to make sure that they pass up the electoral threshold, this will eventually result in all 10 seats granted to two lists of the former joint list. So much depends on what is going to take place in the next 2 weeks, actually.
Arik, another question regarding Gideon Sa'ar and Benny Gantz. According to IDI's statistics, Arabs mostly had chosen Benny Gantz's Blue and White Alliance in the last election as their second choice as a Jewish party. So right now, you said it before, Benny Gantz is no more relevant. And do you think that they would choose Gideon Sa'ar as a possibility to overthrow Benjamin Netanyahu? And directly connected to my first question, do you think that Arabs had chosen Benny Gantz just to overthrow Benjamin Netanyahu?
I think Arabs voted for Benny Gantz for a good reason, that Benny Gantz, then the leader of the blue and white large coalition between 3 or 4 parties, he said that he will consider to repeal the nation-state law. The nation-state law serves as a major obstacle for Arab citizens to participate in Knesset elections and to feel like regular citizens in this state. Israel is defined Jewish and democratic. So historically and traditionally, it was said that, well, Israel is a democracy and it grants full equality for its citizens regardless of their religion or ethnic origin. And this was the actual hope, that the blue and white will introduce a change in the political discourse and maybe even change this nation-state law. Gideon Sa'ar is one of the pro of this nation-state law. Actually, he really endorsed the law, and it doesn't seem that he's going to give up this law. So I think, according to the current political status and configuration, that Gideon Sa'ar is not a viable option for our voters. The reason why they intend maybe to vote for Likud is simple. The Likud is the ruling party. Benjamin Netanyahu is prime minister with an experience more than 10 years. So if anyone can deliver the goods, it should probably be Netanyahu, regardless of the question whether the Arab voters love him or not. So the reasons and considerations are very pragmatic and focused on achieving and gaining, realizing the day-to-day needs and not for long-term political aspiration.
So maybe we should ask, since we discussed, Netanyahu's gaining support from the Arab voters, maybe another phenomena is the latest, normalization of relations between the Arab states and Israel. It actually created a huge, impact in, Israel's foreign policy in the region. But do you think such regional development actually would have an impact on Israeli political scene in terms of the Arab voters maybe getting integrated more into the system and in terms of turnout, in terms of support to Netanyahu? So do you think Arab normalization will have a big impact on this?
Indeed, the Arab public supports these normalization agreements. We have seen several public opinion polls conducted in the last 2 months that consistently 2/3 of the public is really looking very positively on these agreements, mainly for economic reasons and based on the hope that the Jewish majority in Israel will be more open-minded to accepting Arab culture. So maybe this will help enhance the nature of relations between Jews and Arabs in Israel. So the Arab citizens generally they support any peace or normalization agreement between Israel and the Arab countries, but political considerations and Knesset vote are completely different things. I don't think that the normalization agreement themselves play a significant role in considering to whom to vote to. Actually, what we see in public opinion polls, that when we ask them, well, what is the most important issue? What is the most burning issue to the Arab public? Day-to-day issues are the most burning issues, like crime and violence and economy and employment and planning and zoning. Only at the end of the line, 2% or 3% say that the Palestinian issue is the most important. And even less so is the normalization agreement. According to the public opinion poll we held last November, it was 1.6% saying that signing another normalization agreement is the most important issue. So normalization is good. By the way, this is another point of contradiction between the Arab public and the Arab members in the Knesset, because as we remember that all members of the joint list voted against on these normalization agreements. They did not welcome them, saying that, well, this is a neglect of the Palestinian issue and the peace negotiations between Israel and the Palestinian Authority. And this, of course, is acceptable and is understood. But the public, by and large, supports these political developments. Again, it does not play a direct political role on the upcoming elections.
Okay, Dr. Rudnitzky, thank you very much for your joining us on this episode. It was such a pleasure to have you in IsrailPod.
My pleasure. Thank you.
And Mustafa Fatih Yavuz was with us, and many thanks for your contributions, Mustafa Fatih.
Thank you very much. It was, again, a good episode for us, and I think this is going to be a good start, and we're going to go with new guests and related to different topics about Israel.
Okay, folks, that's it for this week. Until next episode, stay safe and take care.